British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Good afternoon and welcome to BCIT's The Crow. I'm your host, Alessia Cusano, and here are your news headlines to 2 o'clock. Minister of Foreign Affairs Melanie Joly and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with Haiti's Prime Minister Gary Conil today ahead of the 79th meeting of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Conil stepped into his role earlier this year after the former Prime Minister was forced out amid surging unrest and violence by criminal gangs. Joly says the international community has a role to play to help bring about stability to the Caribbean country. Joly says Canada continues to fund support, while other countries provide boots on the ground in forms of police.
Clearly, what is happening in Haiti is catastrophic. We are seeing the numbers, and we're seeing too many innocent children, innocent women, innocent men facing famine and facing real hunger issues.
Conservative leader John Rustad has announced a proposal for BC rent and mortgage rebate, calling it the Rustad rebate. A statement from the Conservatives says the rebate would begin by exempting $1,500 per month from provincial income taxes in Budget 2026. It will then increase by $500 per year to $3,000 per month. Rustad says the rebate would help renters and homeowners alike, offering real relief to BC residents feeling the pinch of high housing costs. Fall is a time of stress and seasonal depression for 15% of Vancouverites. With midterms approaching, it is leaving many students to feel stressed. Our reporter Emily Deline spoke with Celine Wells, a therapeutic pottery studio owner.
Art is a hands-on way to combat stress and sadness. It allows the artist to put themselves in their work, making something bad turn beautiful. Celine Wells owns Secrets of the Kiln Pottery Studio in North Vancouver. She holds classes for people struggling with stress and depression, and she says fall is when she sees a rise in clientele.
Once the weather sort of shifts to a bit wetter and a bit gloomier, then obviously there's less things to do outside as well, but people do look for alternative activities and things that will help them to not necessarily cope, but also just have something fun to look forward to.
Celine continues to say that she admires the passion people have when they start pottery, whether it's therapeutic or not. Emily Deneen, BCIT's The Crow.
Popular German festival Oktoberfest kicked off this weekend. The annual event held in Munich, known for its beer and folk festivals, will run for 2 weeks, ending on the first Sunday in October. This year, non-alcoholic options have taken the festival by storm. Our reporter Sophie Hansen has more on the reason behind the shift.
2 of the 18 tents available at this year's historic German celebration specialize in non-alcoholic beverages. The event, that's known for its vast array of beers and spirits, has introduced non-alcoholic beer and a unique alcohol-free spin-off on classic drinks. Vancouver's Oktoberfest, that is scheduled to begin in early October, is expected to showcase many alcohol-free options, with some locations even offering alcohol-free take-home packages. Vancouver has seen a drastic increase to over $294 million in total revenue for non-alcoholic drinks in 2024. Sophie Hansen, BCIT's The Crow.
The strike launched by Israel and Lebanon today have now killed over 356 people. Israel launched hundreds of airstrikes in southern and eastern Lebanon, causing thousands of people to flee the country, causing the main highway to the city of Beirut to be jammed. This is the biggest exodus since the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war. The Israel military said it hit more than 800 targets on Monday, linked to Hezbollah weapon sites. Now on to weather. In Burnaby and across Metro Vancouver, it is heavily rainy and cloudy, with a temperature of 14 degrees on this gloomy Monday. However, the sun will return tomorrow. Those were your 2 p.m. news headlines. I'm Alessio Cusano, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikki-King.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikki-King. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.
Good morning. I'm Lauren Achille, and this is your latest sports update to 210.
The Vancouver Canucks have wrapped up their training camp in Penticton, BC. This was their first camp held in Penticton since the fall of 2010. Head coach Rick Tocchet said he had a great time, and the team had a lot of memorable moments.
Well, I'm just impressed with the whole week or 10 days we've been up here. Cities treat us great. The fans, it's just a special place to be. I think the management really loves it up here. I thought the trainers loved it. It was very smooth. And then obviously when you could raise money for charities like that, it's incredible. So it's been a great 9 days experience for me.
Pettersson, Hughes, DeBrusk, and Myers are gearing up for a preseason match against the Calgary Flames in Abbotsford. The game is on Wednesday at 7 p.m. Tickets are available. In volleyball, SFU's Davida Hill, an offensive player, was awarded Player of the Week this week by the Great Northwest Athletic Conference. Hill led all GNAC players with a 5.33 kills per set. She started the week off with 14 kills on 24 swings for a .458 attack percentage during the 3-0 run of Alaska Anchorage. The Surrey local ranks 5th in the GNAC hitting percentage. In football now, BC Lions' Nathan Rourke will remain the starting quarterback for their team. He was benched at halftime of the team's 33-17 loss to the Toronto Argonauts in Week 15 after completing half of his passes, rushing for a 9-yard touchdown. He also sustained a knee injury in Week 9 while playing against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Lions sit second in the West Division with a 7-7 run behind the Blue Bombers with 4 games remaining on schedule. Moving on to lacrosse. The World Box Lacrosse Tournament has begun in Utica, New York, and the Canadian women's team is off to a hot start. Our reporter Ryan Sheridan has more on the local talent competing for the world title.
Canada is setting the tone early in this tournament as they are yet to surrender a goal. The team is currently 3-0 with a 31-0 victory over Finland, 26-0 over Australia, and 28-0 over Germany. The stacked roster has 5 BC-born players, including star player Megan Kinna from Maple Ridge. Kinna has 17 points in just 3 games, and she explains how she's going to keep the momentum going for the rest of the tournament.
This is just genuinely so special because no other countries are really as developed in the box game as Canada. Give a lot of credit to my teammates. I think they are the ones that, are forcing us to be moving the ball really well. And, as long as I can get my teammates open, then hopefully they can do the same for me. And that's where my mindset's at. Yeah.
The team will take on Ireland tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Ryan Sheridan, BCIT's The Crow.
Now back to football. The CFL's 9 teams will wear Indigenous design logos to commemorate the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation during its Week 17 games. Created by local Indigenous artists, the logos can be seen on players' helmets and on the broadcasts of different channels, including TSN. The goal is to recognize and focus on Canada's Indigenous history, but also the path towards education, action, and overall awareness. Moving on to tennis, Montreal's Felix Auger-Aliassime will lead the Canadian team into the Davis Cup Final 8. He will be joined once again by Denis Shapovalov from Ontario and Vasek Pospisil from Vernon, BC. The Davis Cup will be held in Malaga, Spain on November 19th to the 24th. And lastly, there is a push for gender equality in the tennis world. Bianca Andreescu is advocating for equality when it comes to what athletes are paid. The video consists of discussions about the color lilac purple, a color that has been previously used to represent the support for gender equality. This has been your sports update to 210. I'm Lauren Achille, and you're listening to BCIT's The Crow. Thank you for listening.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow. This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
the Canadian government introduced the Canada Disability Benefit with the promise of decreasing the number of people with disabilities living in poverty. The Disability Without Poverty movement says roughly 41% of those living in poverty have some sort of disability. The 2023 Disability Without Poverty report card highlighted that people with disabilities face systemic barriers into achieving and maintaining decent work, housing security, income, and support to live adequately. For both cognitive disabilities and physical disabilities, living costs are higher and barriers are frequent. Ken Boyce is a disability rights activist, and they are someone who lives with disabilities themselves. Ken finds that the Canada Disability Benefit is insufficient and leaves many without proper support and resources. Ken, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So tell me about why this topic is so important to you.
So as someone who has disabilities, I realized very quickly when I first got ill and then over the periods of being diagnosed that there isn't many resources for disabled people in Canada at all, and we're very much still seen as second-class citizens. So by accepting disability benefits, because I had to, I didn't have a choice, the amount of that I saw my quality of life decrease, not just because of my illness, but because of the incredible restrictions that come with even accepting these very minimal benefits. Really puts you at a disadvantage compared to able-bodied Canadians.
Mm-hmm. So the Disability Without Poverty movement evaluated the Canadian government to, quote, performance towards people with disabilities and poverty, and they responded by giving them the letter grade of I for incomplete. What's your response to a grade like that? Do you think it's accurate?
Yes, I think it's extremely accurate. Disabled people in Canada, we are in the poorest 5% of Canadians. And one thing that I tell people is that we live in essentially what is legislated poverty. Because to receive roughly about $17,800 a year is the maximum benefit you can get as a single individual, which won't even cover rent for a one-bedroom apartment in Canada. To receive that amount of benefits, you're only allowed to make, if you work, if you're a disabled person who is lucky to have the ability to still work, which I am, you're only allowed to make about, I believe it's $16,200 in work income a year. So even if you're able to work as much as you can, you're living off of approximately $30,000 to $32,000 a year, which is under the poverty line, and that's if you can work. So for people like me, where I'm lucky enough to be able to work, I'm struggling with poverty. And for a disabled person who can't work, they are ending up on our streets. They're slipping through the cracks.
So then, why do you think it's important for people without disabilities, like myself, to understand the implications of the Canadian Disability Benefit?
Well, I mean, I hate to say this, but, you should care about other people, right? But I think we're living in such a world where, due to the internet, we're almost exhausted from being asked for constant empathy. There's always another terrible story. So another thing that I tell people is disability is coming for all of us with age. Anyone can become disabled at any time, and there is no one who won't become disabled with age. So you really should care about it because it is going to happen to you. The realities that I'm facing today, that other disabled Canadians are facing today, will be your reality tomorrow. So we have to prepare for it.
Mm-hmm. So the world often talks about things like racism and sexism. We see it in media, on social media, like you said. Why do you think ableism isn't talked about as much, particularly in the case of the Canadian Disability Benefit?
For sure. I think there's two reasons. I think the first reason is that people still have a very stereotypical view of disability. Unless someone has a very obvious physical disability, people might not understand the impact. For me, for example, at my job, I've had coworkers forget that I'm disabled. And I've had to remind them, hey, I'm disabled, I can't do that. And they go, oh, because I don't fit their stereotypical view in their mind of what a disabled person is. There's an effect that kind of happens in people's heads. If I tell you to picture a haunted house, you're going to picture kind of a house that looks like the Addams Family house, because that's what the media has told you a haunted house looks like. And if I tell you to picture a disabled person, you're probably going to picture someone physically disabled. So there's disability is a spectrum. And everyone who is disabled has very unique challenges. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, which makes it very, very difficult when it comes to talking about disability. I think the other reason, too, is that people are maybe afraid to offend. If people do notice my disabilities, they oftentimes will apologize to me because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, you don't have to be sorry. We could talk about this anytime. So there's also a shame surrounding disability because, we're seen as people who can't take care of ourselves. We're seen as burdens. We're seen, and this is how the Canadian government sees us, is essentially we do not have capitalistic worth to them because in their view, we can't produce enough capital as workers without supports. So that creates a shame as well. There's a shame in asking for help. There's a shame in admitting you're disabled. And even for me, when I first became disabled, there was a lot of shame when I realized I can't do all the things I used to do. So I think, the lack of disability is twofold. We're a very complex group. And especially for people of color, and especially Native people in Canada who suffer from disabilities, they're suffering even more.
Mm-hmm. So why do you think information about the Canadian Disability Benefit is so difficult to navigate? I think of people with cognitive disabilities. Why do you think it's so difficult to navigate?
The reason why is because a lot of these government websites, they were made by able-bodied people, able-bodied software programmers. There isn't a lot of effort put forward by our government to make sure that the websites themselves are accessible, easy to understand, that they work on screen readers, that they work for someone who needs very large font size. They really don't put any effort towards that. They're not hiring disabled people to design their website. So, if you are put in charge of creating something for a disabled person and you're not disabled yourself, there's just certain things that you're not even going to consider. It's not even going to occur to you because, you might not be aware that some people have certain things that they need to even access the internet. Like if someone needs an alternative mouse or keyboard setup, it changes the location of the buttons on the page. So then you might not even be able to click next to submit a form or to view more information because you can't physically click that button. So there's so many things that aren't thought about, and it's on the government, really. They put it on advocates to have to help sit down and help people fill out forms, which takes away agency from disabled people to be able to help themselves.
Mm-hmm. So even on that same strain, we see the response online from users that say the regulations in place in order to receive funding from the government as a disabled person is extremely restrictive. So what sort of regulations have you found to be the most restrictive in that sense?
For sure. I think that I would be failing my community if I didn't mention that there is no equal marriage in Canada because disabled people cannot get married without losing our benefits. So, for example, when you're receiving provincial disability benefits, which in British Columbia is called PWD, you have income limits. As I said, as a single person, I'm allowed to make up to $16,200 a year in work income. If you are a couple, so let's say that I had a husband or a wife or a partner, and let's say that my partner worked part-time at the gas station, minimum wage. If they make, I believe it's $19,400, if they make over that, then I lose my benefits. It starts every dollar that goes over, they decrease $1 from my benefits. So you wouldn't have to work much as part of a couple to hit that threshold. Like I said, you could work part-time at a gas station and hit it. So do you think you'd be able to support a family of two on a gas station income, especially if your partner was disabled? Disabled people have higher living costs, we have medical costs, we have higher transportation costs, etc. So really, it puts us in a position where we cannot get married or else we will lose our benefits. Another issue on top of this is for people who do have a spouse who can support them and they lose their benefits completely, but maybe the spouse is well off enough that they can support them, it traps the disabled person possibly in abusive or unsafe situations. Because if my partner is abusive, but they're completely supporting me financially, I cannot leave. So, the government's really failed Canadians on that. So I tell people all the time, there is no equal marriage in Canada. Other things that are incredibly restrictive have to do with this new benefit, the Canadian Disability Benefit. They trapped it behind the restrictor of needing a disability tax credit. Disability tax credit is extremely difficult to apply for and get approved for. It's a very long process. It costs about $200 to get a doctor to even fill out the forms, which is a lot of money for a disabled person on assistance. And then on top of that, you need a doctor who's educated on how to fill out these forms properly, because if your doctor doesn't have experience filling out these forms, you're likely to be denied, as well as you need access to a family doctor, which many disabled people don't have, many Canadians don't have. So there's so many barriers to even accessing this new benefit on top of the barriers and restrictions that come with having PWD. And I think the government has really failed in making any sort of benefit accessible. They come with so many restrictions and so much red tape that when you take the benefit, you're almost stepping into a bear trap that's slowly closing around you, because there is so many restrictions and so many rules that come with it that it limits everything you can do.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ken. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain this to me, to learn a little bit more.
Oh, for sure. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So Ken will continue to advocate through education and post on social media in hopes that the conversations around disability continue. This has been For the Record. I'm Sophie Hansen for BCIT's The Crow.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.